This is a Dragon Age short story, The Wake.
We were 10 years old. Lucanus had just read some book about the wyverns, and suddenly that's all he'd talk about. Wyverns. All the time. Wyverns.
Ilario told the story with a fond amusement, and an impressive amount of confidence considering that he was slung over Viago's shoulder and couldn't find the ground with both feet. Viago sighed and shifted Ilario's weight onto his shoulder as they reached the foot of the stairs to the casino guest rooms. The casino belonged to House Cantori. Taya had sent the staff home. The windows and mirrors were all temporarily covered with a heavy black velveteen to prevent any wandering souls from getting lost on their way. The tables for cards and dice game had been cleared and set instead with lavish floral arrangements of crystal grace for parting, an embryon to ease a sorrowful heart. Their perfume clung to skin and clothing, but it still wasn't sweet enough to cover the stench of liquor wafting off Ilario Della Morte. Maker. Taya owed him for this.
There I was, so covered in prickled bears. I stuck to everything I touched. Lucanus was nothing but mud from the ears down. Katerina just stared speechless.
Ilario laughed. His knees buckled, or he just stopped trying to walk entirely, and he collapsed onto the stairs, taking Viago with him. Viago cursed under his breath, and tried to pry the larger man off the stairs, the smooth, dark samite of Ilario's jacket slipping out of his grasp. Viago wished he'd gone with Plan A, drugging Ilario to sleep in the lounge and throwing a sheet over him. But Taya's deep, dark eyes had pleaded with him to take care of the reeking drunkard, and Viago sighed and cursed again. For a moment, he had a clear, perfect vision of leaving Ilario snoring in the middle of the staircase. Except Taya would kill him. Maybe even personally.
He was my cousin, but we were more like brothers, really. Always getting himself into every sort of trouble, and I was always right behind him, you know? Always.
Ilario's voice suddenly grew thick with emotion.
Now, there is nobody for me to follow.
Viago let out a sigh, then crouched down and levered Ilario off the steps with a slightly pained grunt.
It should have been me.
Ilario sounded bitter now. The rant was approaching the end. He'd repeated this speech like an actor rehearsing for a particularly infuriating play for hours downstairs. As his composure crumbled, and he looked more and more like he'd fought a herd of Druffalo, and lost. Viago lurched up the last of the stairs, and fumbled with the door to the closest guest room. For one hellish moment he thought he'd have to pick the lock, but it opened. He dragged Ilario to the bed and dumped him like a corpse.
Did I tell you about the time Lucanus took me wyvern hunting?
Ilario asked as Viago wet a handkerchief with a few drops from one of his vials. Before he could start yet another rendition, Viago covered Ilario's nose and mouth with the cloth, knocking him out.
Another time,
Viago replied, and he left the room.